What is mindset? Our mindset is based on what we believe, and anything we believe in, we put into motion. I have spent my life putting the mindset of perseverance into motion, and now I am here today to share my journey along with others whose mindsets have changed the course of their lives. Hi, I'm mindset coach Lorraine Lindsey, and I believe that if you can change your mind, you have the power to change your life. So are you ready? Welcome, welcome, welcome to the Mindsetters. We are here today to talk about forgiveness. We are continuing our series on forgiveness. And today we're going to touch a little bit deeper in terms of the forgiveness of our fathers. There are a lot of us out there who are struggling with forgiveness, and it trickles into our adult life because we have some forgiveness issues that we have with some of our parents. And so today we're going to be very specific to talk about forgiving our fathers. And I'm so very excited that I have a very special guest in the building today to talk about her journey being a fatherless daughter. She has written a book. She's also a very dear friend of mine. It is Latasha Walker. And a little bit of a background on Miss Latasha Walker. Latasha Walker worked as a licensed educator for over a decade. Latasha has an MS in counseling and holds several yoga certifications. Her professional encounters as a school counselor assisting students and their families in crisis helped to foster her healing journey. With the newfound desire to heal, she found direction. Now her mission is to help people heal fully and authentically so they can also find their life's purpose. Latasha is a licensed clinical therapist intern, a yoga and meditation instructor, author, and life purpose coach. Her passion is bringing awareness of the topics of mental health, emotional healing, and parental abandonment with the use of yoga, therapy, creativity, and spirituality. She is getting ready to launch her brand new book, which is Distance to Mercy, a story about a fatherless woman's journey to truth, healing, and purpose through yoga and spirituality. It is in this self-help memoir, Latasha invites you into her childhood to experience as she experienced fatherless daughter and how she seeks to understand the difficulties this void presents in her relationship with her struggle for self-love and acceptance. The journey of Distance to Mercy begins by highlighting the emotions and eternal dialogue that overshadow the mind of a person that experiences parental abandonment. Latasha offers keen advice for single parents and others who are lacking a parental relationship. So Tasha, I call you Tasha, it's Latasha Walker, but affectionately known as Tasha. Thank you so much for being here to share your journey with us. And I know that what you have to share, your personal journey will add so much value to people who can totally relate to your journey and how you found strength and perseverance in being a fatherless daughter. So I want to kind of start the show with sharing a little bit of my own personal journey. This is actually going to be a very heavy topic for me because it really touches on my personal experience. I had a father who I considered a true father to me. I, met him when I was 6 months old, and he raised me until I was 10. And unfortunately, at the age of 10, he took his life. And there was as a 10-year-old girl, there was a lot of confusion about what it meant for someone to opt to take their life. And in that journey and in that experience, there was a part of me that blamed myself. And I'll share a little bit of why I blamed myself. But ultimately, as a woman, coming to an understanding of learning who this man was and having incredible compassion for what his journey was and what led him to that level of sorrow that he felt that he was no longer needed, which he was. I also have my own personal journey with my biological father, who I didn't have a connection or relationship with. However, I was always kind of taught to feel like he was the nice guy that got away, but I always wondered why he never came for me or came to rescue me when my dad left me. And I didn't realize how much that was affecting my life until I became an adult and really tried to bond with him. And I realized, wow, there's a lot of resentment and bitterness I have towards him. And even now, I've forgiven my dad who took his life, but I've been really struggling forgiving my biological father in my adult life. So we'll get into that. We'll talk about that. but I definitely want to listen to all of our journeys and really talk about how what we've been through and the power of forgiveness in that and understanding the mistakes our parents made, particularly our father. So again, welcome, Tasha. And who wants to kind of to begin with this? Or maybe I should start with you, Tasha. Tell us a little bit about your book, a little bit about your journey, and how you came to the healing to say, I'm going to use writing this book to be a part of my healing journey. So share that with us if you don't mind.
Definitely. So when I was first inspired to write this book, simply working with students that were teenage years at the time, it really kind of opened me up to thinking about and kind of reminiscing on my own, journey as a teenager. And so it had me thinking about how, when I first started dating to where I was at the present time and being a woman, being married, being a wife, being a mother, how that relationship had impacted the other aspects of relationships that I was currently in. So I just decided to go deeper. And so this book was that project of me going deeper and finding out the impact that an absent parent has on your life. I saw it in my students, and I started to see myself as not different from them. The more I talked to them, the more the more we discussed these issues, it just came apparent to me that I was just an older person, but in the same shoes, so to say.
They say to teach is to learn. It's amazing that when we become teachers, which is such a gift, by the way, how we can sometimes learn in our teaching.
Right.
So ultimately then, as you were going through this and experiencing this, what was it that where the inspiration came to say, I need to write about this. I need to be vulnerable and really share my story, because your book is very vulnerable.
Yes.
It's very, very,
Yes.
very open and very just really open to your experience. So what led you to that and feeling comfortable in that vulnerability?
I think for me, it was the spirituality piece. So I am a very spiritual person, and I feel that my connection with, God, or, however people define this force in our lives, definitely brought me through this journey. And that gratitude for being brought through this journey, gratitude for the experiences, it all built up my confidence. And I knew that I had to be vulnerable in this way. I knew that I was given certain resources, certain experience, certain knowledge that would make me the person that needed to say, hey, I'm not different. Like, I've been through my own stuff. And I would often tell my students, and they really related to me because, I was just honest. I wasn't, this teacher, this educator who was perfect, so they got to see the real me.
The transparency is so profound, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, ladies, what do you think? I mean, I think like I wanted us to be here. Obviously, we're very close. I've known Tasha for a long time, and it's a vulnerable topic, and so I couldn't think of who else better to sit and talk about these things, because Carmen, you had last week when we started the topic on forgiveness, and you started to say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that maybe there's layers to me not having forgiven my father.
Yeah.
And you were struggling with it because, as you shared last week, when he was dying and you were there to care for him, one of the things that he had shared with you, or he had said to you, was, thank you for forgiving me. And the realization that you came to say, but you hadn't asked me for forgiveness.
Yeah.
So I know you needed to kind of ponder. Do you want to kind of share what you've thought about since then? And I know this is heavy, so.
Yeah. Me and my suppression, suppressing feelings. And I don't know if I can completely pinpoint what I need to forgive from my father. I realize the choices I've made in men reflect people not showing up for me. And my dad had a drug problem my whole life, for as long as I can remember. And he was a good dad. It wasn't that he wasn't there, or he was sick. So when my parents separated, he just didn't contribute to us too much after that. I didn't realize how many grudges I held against my dad for that. I didn't realize how it affected my life, dating and being a wife and trying to figure life out. But when he said those words to me, like, I'm glad you forgave me, it's like he must have knew something, but he never asked. So it just kind of hit a little different. And I feel like I forgive him, but I felt like I forgave him. I just really must not have, because I still feel pain. I still feel, and I don't know if it's because he's passed away that I just don't have closure, or I'm never able to have the conversation. So it's still kind of just a raw emotion that I have. I don't know how to really articulate it yet. Does that make sense?
No, it does. 100%. Were you going to say something about that?
No, I think that you said it perfectly. That's exactly how you feel.
I think it's interesting to, because I think that it touches me when you say that relationship you had with your father, unbeknownst, it trickles into your decision making in your personal life. And I had that epiphany for myself. As a matter of fact, I wrote a workshop that I would like to do someday that is about who is your father. And I remember when I was going through some personal struggles in my relationship, and I was really feeling depressed and distraught, and I was repeating things, and I started noticing patterns. And I started asking myself, why am I choosing the same kind of person in my life? Why are these things acceptable for my life? And why do I keep feeling like I'm hurting? And one of the things that I started to do is I started to journal, and there were two men in my life, right? There was my stepfather and there was my biological father. And I literally had to write down, well, who was he, my stepfather, to me? And he was a man that was my hero to me, but he was an abuser to my mother. He was violent and abusive to my mother. So there was a man that I could see be mean and abusive and violent, but I can still compartmentalize that and make him still a safe person and a hero to me. Then at the same time, he was someone who had pain that I didn't understand, but he promised me he would always be in my life to protect me. He always told me I was going to be a beautiful girl, and then he left. And I literally thought that the reason why my dad left me was because I kicked him on the swing the weekend before. And I had a dream that he died, and I told him. So I thought because I told him I dreamt this and I kicked him on the swing, he didn't want to be in my life anymore, that I thought it was my fault, right? On the other hand, I had a father who was seemingly this nice guy. My mother always said very nice things about him, and, he loved me, and I left him, and I broke his heart, and he was this nice guy. But I never felt like he had a backbone. I always saw him as a weak man. Like, how do you let someone just take your daughter away and things like that? So I say all that because what I started to realize was that my pattern in my adult life was this. I could be with a man who was abusive, but he could still be my hero. And if he were to emotionally abandon me, I would somehow blame myself. That was the narrative that I taught myself from the age of 10 years old, right? And then the nice guy that comes to me that's going to love and dote me, he was just going to be a weak man without a spine. He was never going to fight for me. But I would find myself either in this relationship, stepdad, or in this relationship, real dad. And until I realized that those things were still at the forefront of my life in my subconscious mind, I was still picking that because I was looking for my healing. I needed my adult life to be in more control than my childhood. So, and I know I'm rambling about this, but I think it's something that is so important. And one of the things for me to say I don't want to repeat those patterns was to first say, to acknowledge that those patterns first exist. And then number two, to say, well, what is the forgiveness I need to have with these men? And how do I start that process? Because there are things that, no, it's not okay you took your life. No, it's not okay that you left me. No, it's not okay that you didn't come for me. But then that's the first part. Be angry, be bitter, be upset. And then the second part was like, well, how do I forgive? So you shared a little bit last week also, Sharlene, about your father, and not saying, this is him over here and this is me over here. Have you ever felt that relationship had any kind of impact in your life?
Well, similar to you. I mean, I think as a young girl, I fantasized of what I thought my father was supposed to be in my life. And as I got older, I looked back and I still wish that was the father that I had. But I created my own boundaries in life and my own idea of what it is for me. I've learned to love from a distance because my father is he's not capable of being that father for me. He's not capable of being a father. He's not really capable of doing much other than taking care of himself right now. So as I got older, I realized that. But as a younger girl, yeah, it was tough for me because I had these fantasies. I was looking for protection. I was looking for someone strong in my life to, if something happened, they have my back.
Yeah.
But I also had an older brother that kind of made up for that too. So that kind of compensated. So it was easy for me to disregard my dad. But at the same time, it's not the same thing,
Right.
Today, my father has Parkinson's. He's in Florida, and he's same thing. He was a hustler, did things to his body, had fun, did whatever. And we don't have a relationship like we call each other or anything. I love him where he's at. I try to open that door, but for me to stay in my joy is best for him to be where he's at.
Right.
And I've created a boundary because I understand that now. One time it hurt a lot. I wanted him to be there and I wanted him to be a part of my daughter's life, our life. But as I brought him in, I realized that it wasn't good for me. So, and that took time too. As a young girl, I could pretty much say I blacked out a lot of what I thought a father should be after I realized he's not that. And I just created my own path in that way.
You know what's interesting, and I've been doing a little bit of research on this because I wanted to be very mindful doing this show and making sure that it wasn't just going to be these stories of like doom and gloom, but I wanted there to be some light at the end of the tunnel in this. And so one of the things in some of my research and that I felt also was the expectation that we have for parents, right? And so, and I know that even as a mother, as children, like you said, I had a fantasy, I had an expectation, I had an idea in my mind of what a father should be. And so we hold, as children, our parents accountable to our fantasy, right? And no matter how much you're present in your kid's life or not, you're never going to be able to uphold the fantasy or the expectation of the child. So you're shaking, you're nodding your head, Tasha.
Oh, yeah.
Expound upon that, because I know that resonates for you.
I watch way too much Cosby shows.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Bill Cosby messed us all up on that one. So
He did, right?
I mean,
Until he
he was
wasn't.
everybody's dad until he wasn't.
Right.
right.
But even
So-
that's kind of ironic.
Yeah.
Yeah. But touch on that.
No, I mean, this ideal, and I agree with Sharlene, in our mind, we have this ideal. And, I had to come to that same realization that even if my father had been there, he wouldn't be Bill Cosby. He wouldn't be a TV dad, so he had flaws. He was a human being, so it's important that we separate from those fantasies and reality at times because it confuses us.
And one of the things you shared with me candidly when we had dinner was you have stepfather.
Correct.
And saying, the focus and the emphasis was the absence of a father, and not maybe recognizing and saying, but I also have this person. And when we're feeling like we're missing something, there becomes this void, and then sometimes we miss out on what we actually have. So do you kind of want to share a little bit about that?
So definitely, that's one of the highlights of my story. I feel is I wanted to bring some, just you're saying, some positivity, and I definitely did. I have pictures and letters that I wrote my stepdad, and really my story is generally about a father not being in the home. That was part of it, that he wasn't in the home because eventually him and my mom also separated. So he wasn't in the home with me, but he definitely took on that role and was willing to take on that role, but I wasn't 100% open. And so I was too busy focused on what I didn't have and that biological connection that never came into fruition. So letting go of that was a big deal, and that helped me in the healing. Look at what I actually had and focus and be grateful for that.
Yeah, did you want to say something, Miss Carmen?
I the very first memory I have of like how I deal with my emotions or was when my parents separated. And I remember not having a feeling about it. Like people like, oh, my parents got divorced and it was the worst day of their life and they were devastated. And I just didn't have a feeling about it at all.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Why do you think that is?
I still don't know because a lot of times I could not have a feeling about something. Like I won't
Shut
feel
it
it.
off.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's like that's where I can that's the first memory I have of that. And I don't know why. I don't know if it was because of what and my dad was not abusive or he wasn't anything like that. He was a provider. My mother didn't work. He just had a drug problem. He was a musician, a great musician. He could have probably the potential to go really far. But I just remember like my mom would get us in the car and we'd go sit at his office late at night and just sit there like for hours, just sit there. Like, why are we here? You know what I mean? But now as an adult, I know why we were there. So I don't know if it was just the pain I saw my mom go through or, she would say like he would leave for days. And I have a memory of my dad coming home with like a scruffy beard and his bass because he played the bass. And he'd been gone for a while, I guess. I don't know how many days, but I just know he was gone for a while and just, going to rehab and watching him go through all that. So I don't know if it was just me like disconnecting from it. I don't know.
For sure. I can say for me, when my dad, I call him my dad because he was my dad to me. When he died, I didn't cry. I was 10 years old and my mother was obviously distraught and hysterical and everybody was really upset. But I just remember vividly, they were doing the wake, the viewing, and everybody says in hysteria. And I sat outside the door and I kept looking inside where he was lying. And I wanted to just go up to him and look to see if he was like I had remembered in my dream. And I remember walking up when nobody was looking and I'm looking in his hair because in the dream I dreamt him laying in a casket and he had dandruff in his hair. And I look and and this is going to sound hocus pocus, but it literally was just exactly how I dreamt.
Wow.
And there was again that feeling of like,
Premonition.
is this my fault?
Yeah. Well,
At 10 years old, you don't know. I'm like, is this my fault? I saw this and told him and really putting that, but I didn't know how to feel it. I just kind of stuffed. And because there was so much chaos around, it was almost though I didn't want to contribute to the chaos. And it took me a long time to really release and mourn him and really, and even to this day, I still struggle a little bit with it, but it took a long time. And, years later, there were things that was told to me that kind of took away his character. And I think that I look back now and I know some of those things were shared with me because of their own grief and maybe their anger towards him taking his life. But it changed my lens about him and it made me very angry with him, although I couldn't recollect the stories that were being told to me. And really having to overcome that. Because as you get older and you're dealing with the abandonment issue, see, for me, the abandonment showed up in every one of my relationships. So I wasn't a needy person in my abandonment. I was engulfment. Like, you can't get too close to me. If you get too close, something terrible is going to happen. And I rather me push you out of my life than to let you in. And it wasn't until I was able to deal with the trauma of that situation and really honest and true candor, like up until even now, really saying, Lorraine, you have to heal the little girl that has a perception of her father's in order for you to really see a man as safe, and I think the healing also started with me becoming a mother to a son, because it was like, I got to believe that he's going to be a great man to a woman. But if I don't believe men could be great, then that means I don't believe my son can be. And so that was probably the first step to my healing journey. And you're nodding your head too, because you have a son.
Yes,
Did that ever contribute in your healing?
definitely. Wow. And I actually do talk about that as well in the book. So I also talk about having a daughter and the differences
Hmm.
between when I had my daughter versus when I had my son. I feel like when I had my daughter, it was just like, okay, you really have to get it together. But definitely, everything you were saying just now just clicked, and wanting him to be. I do talk about us kind of butting heads, and I just had to step back and realize, he was not a representation of
Mm-hmm.
other men that I have had in my life. So, definitely
Hmm.
wanting him to be better.
I know when here I go. My daddy passed away, so looking at pictures, my God, he was there.
Mhm.
You okay?
He tried,
Yeah.
and because I held it,
You okay? You want me to give you a minute?
no, because of what I held, I didn't fix it, and
What do you mean you didn't fix it?
or I didn't try to fix it,
Mm,
and I didn't realize I was holding resentment.
yes.
May I ask you a question? Why do you feel that you needed to?
Now,
But why?
because I don't have closure, because I don't have the
Mm.
opportunity.
Mhm.
So that's where it's like, God, I don't know what that forgiveness looked like,
Mhm.
and I'm
Mhm.
every Christmas, birthdays or things, he came, he made an effort to come.
Mhm.
And so just from however I felt, I don't have the opportunity.
Mhm.
So maybe it's forgiving myself that I need
Mhm.
to do,
Mm.
not so much him.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
sorry.
No,
No, don't be
be
No,
sorry.
Uh-uh.
But here's the thing, and I'm
no.
going to say this as I listen to my friends speak and be so vulnerable.
Mhm.
We do that to ourselves too, is that the accountability, the over accountability, and saying, what could I have done? And I think we've all, as a little girl, I did that, not knowing. You're doing that now.
Mhm.
Yeah. And saying, I see that he tried. Could I have done something different? But that is also the burden that was put on you.
Yeah.
And not to look at it and be in a way that's negatively, but it's to say, even after this, I'm still being accountable for him when that wasn't your job,
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes when you can release yourself of the burden of doing his job for you, then your healing can begin. And that without any judgment,
Mhm.
without any judgment. Because when I hear you say that, it speaks volumes to many things that, you and I have talked about personally
Yeah.
and how that affects your life. It's like making the excuse for him instead of him coming to you with something.
Yeah.
And not, again, no judgment, but just an observation to say, how is that showing up in my life?
Mhm.
How is it that maybe my partners and things like that I have in my life, that I'm looking for the resolution in their attempt instead of them being the person to come to me with it? Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And I've done that too in my own life, with like the issues that I've had with my biological father and wanting to make the excuses for the nice guy. When the nice guy didn't show up the way I needed him to show up.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay, just because you're nice, it's not a rite of passage. It's like, I need you to be there for me. I need you to, but not being able to vocalize and share that with my own father, that I don't have the voice to share it with the person in my life. And so it shows up in other ways with my behavior, with my sabotaging, with my outburst,
Mhm.
and not really saying, "Ugh, it's because I haven't forgiven my dad." You know? Does anybody? I feel like I'm just like,
No,
I
I
know
mean
it's
that's
heavy, that it gets us all in our heads
Right.
about our issues.
Mhm.
So I'll ask
right.
this question: what do you think are, and Tasha, for especially, let me direct it to you first, if you don't mind. what do you think are the steps to healing, to letting go, and to forgiving? Because you literally wrote a book about it.
Yes.
And I know some of us still struggle with it. So what would you say to people who are out there listening and saying, I don't know how to forgive my dad. I don't know how to move on. I don't know how to let it go. What are the steps?
Oh, it's definitely a process. I think it starts with patience. And Carmen definitely like hit the head on, right when she said self-forgiveness, that's what it's all about. Oftentimes we think it's more so about forgiving the person than it is about forgiving ourselves. Because we do have to, we have to own the feelings that we've had. And the part of it that gets very confusing as well is that we, just like you said, it starts to play out in our lives. And so the decisions that we've made, we have to forgive ourselves for those decisions that resulted from this root problem or this root experience in our lives that has shaped so many other decisions and experiences that have happened. So it all just kind of layers. So self-forgiveness is a big part of it as well. The title Distance to Mercy actually is the distance that I felt. What is mercy? I thought it was something. Is it something that we give ourselves? Is it something that we give someone else who doesn't deserve it, which is our forgiveness? And how far are we willing to go to make sure that we forgive that person? Because it's not just about that person. It's about ourselves and living our best life. And in order to do that, we have to have forgiveness of ourselves as well. So it's all connected, even though we may think that this person is the offender, this person is the person that needs to be forgiven. But because it plays out in our lives, it's connected.
Right.
Could you help me identify the difference between the word mercy and grace in your because I feel like they're similar, but I know there might be a difference in that.
I felt that mercy definitely is it's something that you feel that a person doesn't deserve. And grace is more of, it's a gift, and it's to me, grace is more like external, and it's something
one's
that
lighter, one's heavier.
Exactly.
I get it. Okay,
Right.
the measure.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's how I see
like
it.
that. That's powerful. Mercy. I think have mercy. When you're a little kid, you're wrestling. Have mercy. But this case here, it's
But
completely
to your
relevant.
point, though, that's a great descriptive way to say. If I'm playing the game mercy, I'm inflicting pain, and the person who's being I'm inflicting pain on you, and I'm waiting for you to ask for mercy before I release the pain. That's the difference. Whereas grace,
it's just given.
It's just given. There's no pain that needs to be necessarily afflicted. So I'm causing you the pain and I'm screaming for mercy. It's almost like the person who is being afflicted is asking for the mercy. You know what I mean? And then I guess grace would be
Almost like tapping out.
Once they let up.
Right.
Once they let up off the pain, now it's like I'm giving you grace. Thank you for easing my pain.
I love it.
Does that make sense?
Yep, total sense, yes.
So I want to put up this quote that I posted this thing with Oprah that you sent me, which I thought was really good because it talked about Oprah, who's a powerhouse, right? And her journey with her forgiveness with her mother, which we'll tap into forgiveness of our mothers. But she says, forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could have been any different. And what I love about this quote is because it truly is that. When we have this bitterness and this holding on to somebody who has offended us, has been an offense in our life, to whatever degree that may be, there is something in our mind that says, I needed that person who had offended me, who hurt me, to have done something different. And it's almost as though when you hold on to it, you're just, there's this, if you want that person to make it right. And when you can forgive it, you let it go. You let it go and say, my father wasn't going to be that kind of person because that wasn't his capacity to love me. And by the way, I don't even know who this man is and what his story is that led him to be that level of father in my life, or lack thereof. You know, we'll talk about this when we get to the mother thing, but part of me letting go and seeing the suicide of my dad was to, as an adult, when I had when I had a little bit more comprehension of my own pain, to really say, who was this man? What was it about his life before he ever knew me that led him down this pathway to that he couldn't see the love that everybody had for him, that he couldn't see his worth, that he thought that his life was meaningless and that it was better off without him, which was a lie. What was this man's story and journey, like your father, that needed to numb himself from his pain that caused him to be an addict? And when you, or your father...
That's what helped me get past my pain, was understanding who he was, where he came from, learning his childhood, learning who he is and why he's that, released me from that, from any pain that I,
Right.
you know, from that fantasy or from that, you know, expectation, because he too had, you know, he had some tough times growing up. And if you don't heal from that, you're bringing kids into this world. How do you can't give what
your
you don't
capacity
have.
is your
Correct.
capacity, right? You could only give what you have.
Right.
And even myself as a mother, I was 17 years old as a mom. So I, at 17 years old, had the capacity to give my son what I could at 17. What did I know at 17? So I can rest assured that there are mistakes that I've made, that there is grace my son has given me, mercy that I'm asking him for.
And I would argue that would be at any age, really, because we're all learning.
But I'm
through
just
that
saying,
process,
as from my own personal experience,
Sure.
and although as you look at my son and his journey, and he seems very astute and successful and things like that, there's certainly going to be afflictions that he has. I want to read this really quick because it's a continuation of what Oprah said on this thing that you shared, and I don't have the quote up, but I'm going to read it. It says, she said, "You think forgiving means accepting what has happened to you, but it's accepting that it has happened to you." So I'm going to read that one more time. You think forgiving means accepting what has happened to you, but it's accepting that it has happened. Right? And then she goes on to say, not accepting that is, or not, it's not about accepting that it's okay what has happened, but it's accepting that it has happened. It's letting go of the past so you don't hold it as a prisoner. And again, this is something for me that's so profound, because in my own, with my coaching and classes and things that I took, and I referenced the Landmark Forum because it was probably one of the most profound courses I ever took. There is the story, and then there is what has happened. And often, not often, but what has happened is not happening right now in this moment. We attach the story and we tell ourselves what has happened, what it means to us. And I think one of those pivotal things about forgiveness is saying, okay, it happened, but now what? Yes, this happened. This is horrific. This has left me feeling this and this and that. This is the story I have attached to what has happened, but it happened. So now what? Because when you say that, you take back control. It happened, but now what? I get to decide. I get to see my dad and say, who was that man? Or I can say, that man hurt me and I'm never going to let it go and it's going to affect my life. You know what I mean? So, I mean, you guys want to?
Well, no, that's good. I mean, it's just owning your power in your life. Like you're telling your own story. You know, we can get stuck in that place of, at least we have a reason. It's his fault, you know, or, you know, hey, this is the path that I have. What am I going to do with it? Am I going to make it powerful? Or am I going to learn from it? Or am I going to repeat it? Or am I going to be poor me because of what I didn't have in life, you know? So I think that also comes with wanting to face these trials in front of us, wanting to see that father is not the father we thought he was, and letting go of that fantasy of what we believe he still can be, or anybody, mom, friend, sister, cousin, whoever. Once we can own that this is what it is, as Oprah says, what has happened. We can't change the past. I think oftentimes we think for some reason we can go backwards and then fix that and then come forward.
Right.
And here it is now, you know.
Man.
We might get an opportunity to do it again, but that doesn't take back what happened already, you know. But yeah.
My daughter told me she doesn't ever want to get married because what is the point? You're just going to fall out of love. And I'm like, here, you know, making a big deal. Me and, you know, I'm divorced, but we have such a great relationship and for our kids. And it's like, I'm thinking I'm doing the best thing for my kids, and it's still the way she's experiencing it. So that's her idea of love, is what I've showed me and her father have showed her about love. And it was kind of like, God, you know, we're human first, and we raise these kids and they put expectations on us, but we're living our life. So we don't really think that, you know, we just say, well, this is what you do, but they're really watching what we do.
That's a place where I had to learn how to forgive myself the most, is who am I showing up for my daughter being in every way, whether my relationship with my mom, my dad, my husband, myself, because she's looking at me, she's watching, and I hope she's better than I am. And that's all I can ask for, whatever she imagines me to be. And that's all we can do.
Yeah.
You know.
You're going to say, Latasha?
No, I definitely agree.
You're like, yeah. I mean, it's
In
such a
agreement.
deep, it's such a deep conversation because again, and we said this last week on the show, that we sometimes we want forgiveness from people, and yet there's things that we've done that we need to be forgiven, right? And so even as parents, you know, we can hold our parents hostage, but then we don't want our kids to hold us hostage, you know, and it's like,
I'm a great mom. What are you talking about?
Right. But we're still just the human first. And I had to introduce my son to myself. And this will, I'll share the story more when we get into the forgiving our mothers, but I literally had to introduce myself to my son and say, you know, he's about 11, 12 years old. And I knocked on his bedroom door and I said, you know, hi, nice to meet you. I'd like to introduce myself. And he's like looking at me like I'm crazy. And I said, no, my name is Lorraine. And before I met you, I was someone's daughter, and I was a sister.
I love that.
And I was a lover, and I was a friend. Yeah, lover, gross. You know? And then I met you, and I needed him to see me and understand that my capacity to love was abundant, which means you don't get just your mama's love. Mama gets to be Lorraine and love her sister and love her friend and love her husband. And there's no competition because what I have for you is unique to you. You can never be my husband, nor can my husband ever be my son. And I needed him to see that so I wasn't constantly being held hostage to just the love he needed from me. And that was
very good of you to do that.
But I was
huge.
Literally, I needed mercy and grace all at the same time because I was in a relationship with a man that was not my son's father. He was, I was getting ready to marry this man, and there was a lot of tension between the two of them. And I even had to have that conversation with who's now my ex-husband, of saying, my son, there's not a competition here. You cannot be my firstborn. And if I would have had multiple children, the firstborn can never be the secondborn, can never be the thirdborn. I'm going to love you guys uniquely because that's just my abundance. It's my ability. And it was something where I was at my wit's end. And the only thing I was like, this kid doesn't know me.
That was clever, the way you did it.
He doesn't
I
know
love
me.
That. Yeah.
Right.
But it's created a foundation for us. And I remember that little epiphany went off in his head. He's like, wait a minute. You mean to tell me he can't get the love you give to me? I said, it's impossible. I said, do you want to be my husband? And he's like, no. Well, then I can't give you that kind of love. It's very special what I have for you. No one else gets it. And that was, something that kind of helped us to learn, and he needed to learn me.
Nice.
Okay, so I want to
Nice.
go into the forgiveness stages of this. And one of the things that I thought about, again, as I was doing the research is, if my father was a stranger and I met him over a cup of coffee, let's say I was at Starbucks and I sat down with this man and he looked sad. And I felt, compelled to ask him what was going on. And he sat down and he told me his story about how his daughter doesn't love him and how he can't get to her and all this stuff. But it wasn't me he was talking about. What would I listen to his story? How understanding would I be in that story? And so I thought, isn't that when it's not happening to us, how open and willing we are to listen to somebody? And who am I to assume that because my father failed me that he doesn't hurt because of that? And can I give him mercy in that? And so I thought, what a great way to start my healing journey is maybe I'll never, with my stepdad, I'll never get to ask him the real story. But I can pretend, I can fantasize about that instead. Who would the stranger, what would the stranger have told me? And what would my understanding be because he was a stranger? So
just what you said right now, I can hear my dad telling that story.
To someone?
Yeah, to someone. My daughter, because of the boundaries that I've created, doesn't mean I don't love him. So sometimes people receive love as you're giving everything to their victimhood or their wherever they're at in their stage of life. And I had to be very firm in my love for my father because I love myself and my family too. And so in order to keep that, and God forbid he passes, and I'm learning so much just from all of this because that day's gonna come, and I need to be okay with that too. So I'm okay with my decisions today now because of what I've learned and what I'm putting out there. And I have much love for him, but to bring him into my life, the man he is today, it wouldn't be healthy for myself or my family. Do I love him? Will I be there for him? Yeah, from afar, but that's my measure. Does it make me less lovable or to him or less loving to him or not? That's his interpretation, and I can only pray for that because he could sit there and have that cup of coffee with you and tell you all about how I'm not a part of his life. And my daughter, I try to love her and she just doesn't answer my phone calls, and I want to go to Las Vegas or whatever he says, but I can't because this, that, and the other. But the truth of the matter is that's his story, right? So I have my own, and I had to grow to be this strong here. This was not something I just came to be. It's something that I had to learn to be in this space. And I feel differently in how I hurt for him. I feel, I have empathy for him, but I don't take responsibility for his position in life. And I understand why he couldn't be the father. I can't even imagine him and my mom even being married anymore. I'm like, that's crazy. They were married? Oh my God. They're still different people, but that's still my father.
Right.
He's still, the memories that I have of him when I was younger are still there. And there's not such good memories too. And I choose to recognize that and put them away because it doesn't serve me in my where I'm at now. I don't like to dwell. I try my best not to dwell on that, but it's,
Do you feel, Tasha, that you have forgiven your father?
I have 100%. Yes.
And share with us, if you don't mind, because I know you talk about this in your book. And then before we close, I want to ask you a few questions as it pertains to your book. But share with us the forgiveness and what that did for you as far as moving forward with your life. How profound was it and how impactful was it for you to actually finally forgive him? And how do you know? How do you know that you've really forgiven him? Sorry, those were loaded questions.
Yeah, great questions. So I think just to start, when I'm thinking about forgiveness, like I said, I realized what I call like a forgiveness chain. And just so we talked about recently with Sharlene just saying, okay, well, what made him that person? The person that had abandoned me or whatnot. So kind of giving him that, not, though I don't know for sure, like what made him the person that he was, but just acknowledging that he had a past. And just as you said, you were a person that had your own experiences before you became a parent. So I think just growing in that and recognizing that he was a whole person before I even came here and he had his experiences. And so just detaching from that helped me a lot, and just looking at my own story and my own self. And as a parent, I had to detach from, and I had to recognize I was a whole person before, I had my son and my daughter. So all of these things, as I said, just started to really overlap for me. And I know that I needed to forgive myself. And so once I realized that, and once I forgave myself and forgave someone else. I started with me. And so I think that's the key, is just forgiving yourself
Now I'm going to
first.
interject real quick because this is something that I think a lot of people will ask. When we say, I have to forgive myself, some people hear, what do I need to forgive about myself when someone did this to me?
Right.
So what is it, if you could be a little bit more specific, what is it that they're actually forgiving in themselves?
So I just looked at my own experiences, things that I've done that, hey, I'm not happy about, that I'm not proud of. So seeing that in myself and wanting to say, hey, I have flaws, that I've made mistakes. So I need to extend myself that forgiveness. I think sometimes it's too painful and it's too hard to envision you forgiving that other person. So start with yourself.
That's so deep. That just really resonated.
Yeah.
That's like a light bulb went off.
Me too,
Forgiving yourself is like saying, okay, these are the things that I've done that I'm not proud of or that I'm not happy with, that I could have done better. And learning to forgive yourself in that, it's almost like, it almost gives you the feeling of what it feels like to be able to give it on to somebody else in a way. It's kind of how I'm
I
interpreting it.
took that as forgiving myself for making the decision to love myself first. Because in that pain with your, there's a lot of guilt that comes with that. I'm creating this boundary, but that's my father. He hurt me, but that's my father. And my daughter has a father. And what's that going to look like? And how's she going to see? So I had to make a decision and forgive myself for feeling the way that I did at that time and just owning it and just growing. That helped me too, because there was a lot of guilt and pain, and like I was very close to bringing him back home. And, I had to decide, and that is not easy at all.
And that's a hard thing, because I think you went through that, Carmen, when her dad was ill, of saying, here's this person who I maybe still, although I love him, right? And I'll let you speak to it. I love this person with all my heart and soul, but at the same time too, I feel pain from this person as well. And now, there's this obligation.
Well, because he needed care, so he needed 24-hour care. So I had to go get him from California and bring him. And
I remember that.
for somebody's life to be reduced to what I could fit in my car, like literally, I had to like scrunch up in the back seat because I just wanted to put as much of his stuff in my car, because that was it. I had to just go get him. So I had to decide what stayed and what went. And I was like, God, why do I have to be the one to do this? And then him coming here, I felt the guilt, like, I don't want this responsibility of having to care for somebody 24/7, but it's my dad. So, and then I thought, if it was my mom, it would be no question. Like, there's not a question in my mind I would do it, but I had that guilt because it's like, why am I even questioning myself with my dad? But he never sacrificed for me. And me and my brother talked about it. And, it was like, he just didn't sacrifice for us. So living with that, and I did the best I could. And it wasn't a long time he was here. However, it just was like,
Perhaps
that guilt you put on yourself, like,
Yeah.
I don't really want to take on this responsibility, but I have to out of obligation, and just feeling like, why don't I want to do that for my dad, So
Maybe that's your forgiveness in yourself. Like the fact that you felt that way, you're having a hard time with that, because it was an obligation versus, like you said, your mom, no question, but your dad, because of the way he showed up for you, it wasn't as easy or seamless. And now that he's gone, it's like, but I get it. I mean,
and then now listening to everything, like the expectation that I must have put on him as far as like just showing up, like he just kind of left and never took care of us or never financially supported us. And I guess his way wasn't good enough for me, like just being there. Like I said, like he would always show up for Christmas, and I love my dad. I don't, we didn't have a bad relationship. It was just things I didn't realize I was still holding on to until recently.
It's profound. It really is. And again, we could talk about this. There's so much healing in the pathology. It's like, there's my dad, but who is his dad? Because I didn't know my grandfather. Do you know what I mean? So who was that man to my father or to my fathers? I mean, I knew my stepdad's I knew my granddaddy, I call him. I knew my stepfather's, he was a granddaddy to me, but even he was a troubled man.
My dad
So-
didn't know his dad, so.
So that's what I mean. It's
Yeah.
like when we really dig deep and we look at it sometimes.
That's the life. I mean, if we could, I mean, that's what life is, though. Like, if you really think deep on that, I mean, look, everybody's got something that connects to something that. So who are we to even? So that's grace, that's mercy, that's divine, that's flow, that's energy. Because we talk about the deep stuff so that we can learn how to cope with it, heal with it, feel with it gracefully and with confidence. But that doesn't take away the pain that we feel during that. So having these conversations, I think, are extremely important for sure.
So I want to ask you, Tasha, and thank you, Sharlene, for
Of
that.
course,
I appreciate that.
Yes.
I want to talk a little bit about your book. I want people to be able to go out there and get your book, read your book. Your book is incredibly healing. I also want you to kind of tap in a little bit before we conclude into you used yoga and meditation, and you know, it's not just necessarily like in my mind I got to forgive my father or whomever I need forgiveness in. Sometimes your body needs to get into the physiological stance, right? Because there's a triad to emotion, right? There's what we tell ourselves. Tony Robbins talks about this. There is what's your state of mind. There is what's happening physiologically in your body, how you posture yourself and move yourself. And I forget what the third one is. You just came back from UPW.
Well, there's also the triad of me, myself, and I, right? That's the other thing that we can look at also. But it's mind, body, and spirit. It's movement, like as you shared. You know, the issues are in the tissues, right? Body keeps score. There's a book, I'm sure you've probably read that before. I don't remember exactly what his third one was.
Okay, so it was peak state. It was your physiology, and then something about what you speak into things, and that's. One, they work hand in hand. It's like a fire. You know, in order to ignite a fire, I've talked about this before. You need heat, fuel, and oxygen. If you remove one of the components, you extinguish the fire. So it's the same thing when we ignite emotion. There is what we tell ourselves. There's the way we posture our body, and then there is the tonation and the whatever.
That's exactly it.
Yeah. So, being long-winded, Tasha, back to you. Tell us how meditation and yoga was an integral part into your healing and your forgiveness with your story about your father.
Right. I believe that the movement of yoga definitely allowed me to release energetically a lot of the tension and stress that you hold on to when you have trauma, you have abandonment, you have, it impacts our entire being. So definitely releasing a lot of that negativity and unforgiveness through my practice, I was able to do that. And it just opened me up to all of the different experiences that I had, that had shaped me into the person that I was. So meditation got me into this space where I could just sit and be still and just hear myself, hear the dialogue that was going on in my mind. So once I was able to hear that, I knew that I needed to make some changes, and I knew I needed to let go. And then just being in the actual training, the yoga training, definitely allowed me to go deeper. So it was something that brought out all of those, everything I knew was happening with my body or recognizing from digestive issues to so many different things that forgiveness does. If we don't forgive, it becomes a burden to us. So I wanted to be free. And I think
love that.
because and that's how I know, to get back to your question 100%, because I felt free. Once I released it,
lighter.
I felt lighter.
Yeah.
And so then I
So,
knew.
yes.
I knew, and then I could talk about it without feeling, and, I didn't feel anything in my gut. I didn't feel anything in other, so
It's
I
really,
knew.
I mean, we did a talk on that about the connection to that in our bodies. I mean, listen, I've been dealing with laryngitis for quite some time. It's been hard for me to shake this voice, but I know it is very much tied to what I'm going through emotionally, and not being able to let go of things, because as much as I may, go out and I do things, whatever, there's this emotional thing that I'm holding in my heart right now and in my throat. The things that I want to say that I can't say to to the person that I'm feeling the emotions for, the angst that I'm keeping in the upper part of my body. And so no matter what I'm doing, I'm like, this part of this, my voice being this way is because of the energy that I'm holding on to. I know it's contributing to it, you know? So, what would you, for people who were to read your book, what do you want them to take away from reading this? What do you really want? What was the compelling why, other than it being your journey, for someone to say, when I read this is what I take away? What would you say that to people?
I want them to take away that forgiveness is possible, that forgiveness is necessary. I want them to take away why they need to heal. I want them to find and consider their purpose for healing. And
I felt that. That made me emotional, actually. Yeah. I'm sorry, continue.
No,
I just felt that.
And though we all have kind of had different situations of finding that closure, and I think with Carmen, I definitely identify with that, and the same that goes for you, Lorraine, the closure, because I wasn't able to get that closure as well from my father for different reasons, but we're all in that same boat. So I had to give myself that closure. So I want people to know that
that's
exactly,
possible.
It is 100%.
Gosh, that's so profound. Oh my God, I just felt that so good. Because your closure doesn't always lie in the person that has hurt you. It's possible to get closure without it.
Yes.
And I love, that's so, I felt that. That's so deep. Because a lot of people can't get closure because they want it from the other person.
Yes.
And so it's like, how do you get it if you can't get it?
Part of that is forgiveness too. There's an unforgiving in all that. There's an unforgiving in that, I believe, as well. You know, closure comes with accepting, forgiving, and then just, I don't want to say creating your own narrative to what that's, but it is. You're concluding the story of your book. Like, you get to write that ending, you know, not the other person. So however you want it to be divinely done, then you create that once you can. Because if you're not forgiving of whatever that is, it's hard to finish the story you're writing, right? Because you have that, there's more chapters left in there, I guess, for that
So we
purpose.
have our proverbial book, and she's got a literal one.
Yes.
So my question, Miss Latasha Walker, how can people get your book? How do they get to read The Distance of Mercy, or Distance to Mercy? Excuse me.
Yes, definitely. So right now I am selling on my website. So as of next week, it will be available on purposetoheal.com. So I'm starting on my website. I'm going in phases. So eventually I'll get to, the Amazon or the Ingram Spark or one of the other platforms to sell my book. But right now I'm starting strictly on purposetoheal.com.
Can't wait to read it.
I cannot wait either. I have been. I got little nuggets.
Then we'll get to Audible, and then we'll get to all that other good stuff. Right? I love that. I love it.
Yes.
Number one seller coming out.
Right,
That's
bestseller.
right.
Thank you.
Man, I'm telling you, and she can write. Her words are just the way she articulates herself. I got a little snippet, so
Okay,
I'm a
good.
little spoiled.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
definitely go out there, www.purposetoheal.com, if you want to go ahead and order the book. But before we
December 3rd.
close, I'm saying
December 3rd next week.
December 3rd next week.
Yes.
Make sure you go to our website and order her book, or you can hit up myself or Sharlene or Carmen, and we can send you the link as well. But before we conclude this beautiful, candid episode of forgiveness as it pertains to our fathers, we always like to do like a little closing. Miss Sharlene, I'll start with you. What would you say to people out there who are needing to work on forgiving their fathers? Any advice you'd like to give them?
Understand where you are with yourself first. And if you have the opportunity to visit your father because he's still living and you're strong enough to do that for whatever reasons, then do it. I learned that from you guys. But if you don't, then you get to write your story, right? However you want it to end. Just be okay with what has been and create your what will be and move from there.
Miss Carmen?
Well, I'm still working, obviously, but Tasha, you really helped me just now with forgiveness. And we were talking last week about what it means to forgive, and when you feel free, like that like just, and that spoke a lot of volume in my life. So thank you for that.
And I'll say I want you to close, so I'll say my piece, and I would love for you to close it out with your perspective, if you don't mind. And I actually wrote this down for myself, even, that I think one of the steps to forgiveness, even if you're not able to actually have that conversation, or maybe you're not comfortable, or it's just too much, is to write a letter to the person, right? Whether it's your father, your mother, whomever. And ask yourself the question, yes, this happened to me, but what can be the lesson for my life in that? Yes, this is painful, and yes, this has happened, and yes, I'm hurt, but where can I find some value and lesson for me? It's like the expression, there's two twins, identical twins, and their father was an alcoholic, right? And one of the twins, same household, they're identical, and one person grows up never touching a drink in their life, and the other one's an alcoholic. And they ask the question, why aren't you a drinker? Because my father was an alcoholic. Why are you a drinker? Because my father was an alcoholic. And so what is the lesson? Because we don't get to choose what has happened to us, but we get to choose how we let it play out in our lives. And that's how we can take our power back. So Miss Tasha, please share with us some perspective, if you don't mind, as we close.
I think forgiveness, the first part is acceptance. So definitely going back to the quote you said at the beginning, the quote about it has happened. Acceptance. You have to accept whatever cards you've been dealt in life. And know that the sooner you start the forgiveness journey and the process, the closer you are to feeling free.
Amen.
And that's the feeling that you want. That leads you to your purpose. That leads you to your best life.
Amen.
Oh,
I love
it.
That was
Oh my
wonderful.
God. This is probably this is probably one of my most favorite that I've ever done. This is the reason why I want to do this podcast, is because this is the mindset that I'm talking about. It's real stories, and really and we're all still have a little touch of struggle, and just getting nuggets from one another. So Tasha, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. I hope that you will come again, because you have added so much value.
Yeah.
So again, thank you all for watching. We are also on YouTube, the Lorraine Lindsey Podcast. So if you tap into YouTube, go to Lorraine Lindsey Podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Give us a thumbs up. Share your comments with us and your own personal journey. And until next time, thank you again. Bye.